Welcome back to Left in Kentucky, and with you as usual, this is Roberto Henriquez,
And Dickerson.
and we are back for another exciting year of February. So this is the second year of 2025.
I'm sorry, that never gets old.
Um, it's just yeah, there's always so much to go through. Um, so yeah, I think so. Think we're going to flip the script a little bit here. Normally we start looking at the big picture, the federal stuff, and come into Kentucky. But I think this week, we want to start with Kentucky and start local. Um, so let's see what's going on. We're in the middle of the legislative session, right, Ann?
Oh God. I if for the if for as long as we've been tracking this, it gets sneakier and sneakier every year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, with the way that the supermajority operates. This is a short session. All the odd years are short years, which means it's only a 30-day session. And that doesn't just mean, straight 30 calendar days.
No.
That means that, they plan out which 30 days during a normal work week that they're going to be in session. Um, and then your even years, your budget years are your longer years, which is funny because that just means it's a 60-day
Right.
session. However, this year, so far, only one bill has made it all the way through to the governor's desk, or at least the last time I looked, that's
Right.
the
And that
way it
was
was.
reducing the state tax.
Right. So that was House Bill 1. So we've only got 15 working days left, which means there is going to be a tsunami hit
Hmm.
us, and I feel like we really need to be prepared, because they're doing it that way on purpose.
Yeah, absolutely.
So trying to be preemptive and warn people about upcoming bills that we see, and perhaps acting earlier, acting before these bills make it out of committee, to be calling and letting people know, hey, this is out there, this is important, and we need you calling the legislative line, making sure that all of our House of Representatives and all of our state senators are well aware that we are not happy with this, and we don't want this.
Yeah, and it really is a good strategy to try to kill these in committee before they even make them to the floor. Just because a bill's been introduced to committee doesn't mean that it's going to make it out of committee to the floor automatically.
Right. And one thing that might surprise people is this. We have talked in the past about how the way bills are numbered, that,
Hmm.
if it's just a single digit number, they're higher or less. If they're less than 100, they're a higher priority than the bills that start with 100. Those bills, and then there's
Yep.
200 level, 300, so on. Um, a couple of the bills that are really scary that we're watching right now are in the 200 and 300 level.
Yeah.
So, I kind of feel like they're taking the deck and shuffling it and making us guess whether they're going to pitch from the top, bottom, or center.
Exactly. I
It's
think
interesting.
it seems like it's a new strategy. They've figured out that we kind of follow based on the numbering. So now they're kind of shuffling things into higher numbers, hoping, well, they just won't notice or they won't pay attention. They'll only focus on the lower numbered stuff. And I think
Right.
they're going to try to sneak some of this shit through.
I totally agree. I totally agree.
Yeah, so one that we they came to our notice today, particularly. I mean, we talked about it before, but is House Bill 352 about post-secondary education. I know Attica Scott, former state representative out of Louisville, she posted a really good Instagram about it, and I just want to play that here. So listen to this, and then we'll talk about it after that.
Hey y'all, I'm former State Representative Attica Scott. Have you seen the latest anti immigrant news out of Kentucky? Let's talk about it. House Bill 352 is an anti immigrant higher education bill that was assigned to the Post Secondary Education Committee on the 7th of this month, the 7th of February. This is a 12-page bill, but only the bolded, highlighted, underlined, and italicized sections are new. So I want to point this out for you. Here's what the legislature is demanding. Require and collect from each public post-secondary education institution the immigration data of the institution's students for each semester and submit that data to the United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. Oh, it doesn't end there. On the last page, it states any public post-secondary education institution and any public post-secondary education institution employee shall not enact, adopt, or otherwise enforce any sanctuary policies. Any sanctuary policy adopted by a public post-secondary education institution prior to or after the effective date of this act that violates this section shall be invalid, void, and unenforceable. But here's how they end it. Sovereign, governmental, and qualified immunity that is afforded to public post-secondary education institutions, including but not limited to immunity under the 11th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, are waived for purposes of this subsection. Kentuckians, call the 1-800-372-7181 message line and say to the Speaker of the House, do not bring this bill to the House floor if it passes out of committee, and say to your member of the House, do not support this bill.
All right, so that horrificness is going on.
I have goosebumps. I'm so angry that I can't even see straight
Right,
because, you know, they're they've actually written this bill, which my representative, Steve Doan, who I previously stated was typically the baby face follower. But Steve Doan is a part of this, obviously, because Josh Calloway is a part of this. Um, it, this makes me livid because in the very last part that Attica talked about, it's basically saying that their law supersedes the Constitution.
right. Where she
No,
mentions the 11th Amendment, right?
right. Which, no, that is, that's illegal. That's unconstitutional. You cannot write a state level bill that supersedes the Constitution of the United States. Can't be
Right.
done. So I don't know what the bleep they think they're doing, but this is insanity. And, the ramifications of things like this are just mind blowing to me.
Right.
Mind blowing. I can't imagine at this day and age. I'm so glad I'm my age. Cuz I can't imagine being a college student and dealing with all of this right now.
Right.
It is frightening. It is tragic. The level of racism, the level of, all the phobias you can name, the level of hate and mandating that people, turn their backs on their friends, their family, everything they believe in, or else you be afraid of violating the law. I can't. I
Yeah.
just I can't. It's hard enough being that age. You're exploring and learning about yourself and deciding what kind of person you want to be in the world and what's most important to you, and having to deal with all this bull crap on top of it. I'm like, enough.
Yeah.
I would I know how I am today. I know how I was back then, and there's one thing that's never changed for me, and that's loyalty.
Yeah.
You would never, ever, ever get me. to turn in a friend. Not happening. I would protect them with everything that I have, physically, emotionally, any way that I could. That has never changed. Um I might be a little vocal about it now, but I was just as vocal back then. So, I there's just no freaking way. There's
Yeah.
no freaking way. And to do this is just obscene.
Well, and I think it's definitely part of the larger picture. And I mean, honestly, it's a class warfare that is being implemented by by the
Government
rich,
fiat.
by the richest people. You've got Elon and his little doggy group or whatever they're called. Um, they're trying to take away the Department of Education, which is who does federal funding for grants to students trying to go to college. So if we do away with that, you got college students also worrying about, is my funding for college going away?
I don't get it. I don't get it. It's not like Kentucky has this rampant problem of criminal immigrants that are. I mean, I'm just waiting for them to do the ultimate crazy, instead of they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs. I'm waiting for Kentucky legislators from the supermajority come out with,
They're
they're
eating
after
the
your
horses.
children,
They're eating the horses.
right? Right? Or like, Marianne Proctor's obsession, a
Oh my
weird
God, what a
obsession with
nut job.
squatting, you know, they're stealing your property. They're sitting there squatting on your property. Really, Marianne? Show me in Union where the hell this is happening, because I never seen anything about it, never
Yeah,
heard anything about it.
Union, Kentucky, and Boone County. I'm sure they have a very desperate squatting problem in
Right?
those $1 million houses.
Right? I mean, take a drive through Triple Crown for God's sake. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a big problem there. I mean, come on, people. Can we at least expend the time, energy, and money for our state legislature to actually do things on behalf of people? Let's do some good.
Yeah.
you know this idea seems to escape the supermajority because they are hell-bent on putting people down, keeping people down, and Kentucky has enough down. We
Hmm.
have, with the new flooding again in a lot of the same areas that happened in 2022. It's the losses that people are suffering are devastating, and now, you know, I, I gotta stop because otherwise I'll be on this all day and we have so much to
Right.
discuss.
So the
But
important thing is make sure in Kentucky, use that 1-800 number that Attica mentioned. And again, that's 1-800-372-7181. And tell the Speaker of the House to not pass House Bill 352 out of committee.
well, yeah, we need him not to bring it to the floor, but even better, call your own state house rep and make sure they know that we are completely against this, and I point out the unconstitutionality of it. This is ridiculous.
Hmm.
Um, but anyway, okay. So a couple other things. Um, this is I don't know, this isn't a hair on fire thing, maybe. I think it's a very short-sighted bill. Is House Bill 15, HB 15, which is to lower the age to obtain a driver's permit from
Mm.
16 to 15. Now, I can understand possibly rural families that this would benefit
Yep.
based on, the need for longer distance travel and scheduling when you're
Right.
working on a farm and all that kind of stuff. However, you know, 15 to 16, this is the time for growth spurts for both boys and girls. Um, this is a time for testosterone surges in boys. There's a reason that the highest insurance rates you're ever going to pay are on 16 to 25-year-old boys. And then the next highest is your 16 to 25-year-old girls. I think it doesn't, I don't think there was a lot of, if any, discussion of the increased risk involved with younger people getting behind the wheel. Less prepared, um, more likely to be involved in fatalities, more likely to be involved in accidents. Did anybody do a study of the economic impact of doing this?
A
I know.
study. A study. We don't need a study. I just know things.
Yeah,
I just, they just thought about it and they were like, I think this will be fine.
right, right. So anyway, I know that the only Democratic state house rep that we have up here, Matt Lehman,
Mhm.
voted no on it. I was very thankful for that.
Yay, Matt.
Um, yeah, yay. Like I said, not the emergency that some of these other things are. I just think it's super risky, especially the other part of that being, if you remember, I forget if it was 1 or 2 sessions ago, where they passed the legislation to allow bigger, heavier trucks on
Yeah.
on the road. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
You add all these factors together, and I think it's a recipe for disaster.
Absolutely.
Um, so that's, you know, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Um, everything's kind of sitting, we're in limbo because they're all sitting in these committees. And it's like, I just feel, I mean, Damon Thayer's not there, but the term Demon Thayer is in
Yeah.
my mind because I feel like there's this demon just waiting and it's like all going to hit on one day with one
Yeah.
signal and it's going to be, ah.
They are. They are.
I know one other thing though, and you kind of mentioned it, and it's good that we talked about schools and Kentucky
Hmm.
in transitioning to the federal side of things because we, of course, have the direct tie-in
Right.
with, Thomas Massey, our congressperson from Congressional District 4, who for over a decade, every single year, has introduced a bill into Congress to abolish the Department of Education.
Yep.
And we all, I mean, it got to the point where it became a running joke. Yeah, yeah, okay. He has like four, three, four bills that he does this with that is the same bill every year. Another one that he always does. And it's only a single sentence. Which it makes it even more laughable. And it's like the Department of Education will be abolished um as of December 31st, 2025, right?
Right.
He writes the same bill every year, just changes the date. And
Right.
he does the same thing with Audit the Fed.
Yep.
He does the Prime Act every year. He does the selling of, oh, there's another tie-in. He does the same thing with the selling of unpasteurized milk
Oh, yeah.
every year. Yeah,
Yep.
that's now been introduced
In the
by
state.
in the state by none other than T.J. Roberts.
Yep.
Good Lord.
Don't forget the tax exempt bullets too.
Yeah, yeah. Oh God, those are still in there. We talked about that last time. We don't need to go into that again. But my point being, now you've got the cuckoo crazy train running the show in DC, and all of a sudden abolishing the Department of Education takes on whole new meaning.
Yep.
Because Trump has outright said that is his goal. He has outright said that he wants Linda McMahon, who is his nominee to lead the Department of Education from the World WWE. I
Yeah,
mean,
Vince McMahon's wife.
what could go wrong
Yeah.
there? Um, you know, so he has his comment was he wants her to work herself out of a job, right? So all of a sudden this takes
Oh, I
on
know somebody I'd like to work themselves out of a job.
me too. But all of a sudden this takes on all new meaning. So, KSEP, the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy, did a
Mhm.
spectacular, beautiful job. And if you don't follow them on social media or you don't get their emails, you
Oh, yeah.
100% absolutely should, because they do exceptional work.
Yeah.
Um,
KCEP, Kentucky Center for Economic Policy.
yes. So, they put out spectacular information on this, which we put out yesterday all across the board, all across our platforms, which shows you that the state of Kentucky stands to lose over $1 billion in federal funding, and just for education. And we can't overstate this enough. I feel like a broken record, but it's a record that still needs to be played.
Yep.
The state of Kentucky takes more money from the federal government than we put in, which basically means the state of Kentucky is subsidized by California, New York, and all the blue states that are constantly complained about by the supermajority in our state legislature when they're like, well, we ain't like California, yada, yada, yada,
Yep.
this woke stuff. Well, the other woke state is paying for you to
Yep.
get what you need. So let's cut with the rhetoric and be serious, right?
Right.
So every single, I pulled out the school districts in covering all of congressional district 4 to make sure that people could look at
Mhm.
their particular school district, whether it's a county district or independent district,
Right.
to see how much money they would lose. And the smaller school districts especially are going to be hit hard, and the ones that are countywide. So I want to take just one. I just randomly pulled it up for Congressional District 4.
Hmm.
So I'm looking at Bracken County schools.
Okay.
Um,
Fairly rural county.
right. One of the smaller counties in
Hmm.
our congressional district. So, the 2023 federal funding for Bracken County schools was 21% of the district's entire budget, just
Wow.
over a fifth of their budget. So if they lose this funding, right, they would lose $780,000 from the U.S. Department of Agriculture to pay for school meals. They would lose $845,000 from the Department of Education funding, and they would lose 8 educator jobs. So
Wow.
imagine Bracken County schools running with 8 less teachers. And how do you choose which teachers those are? Um, and to lose the funding, especially for meals.
Hmm.
I mean, how I I don't understand being able to look at yourself in the mirror at night and know that you're pulling the funding from feeding kids in order to give billionaires a tax break. I and how you can lay your head down at night and proclaim your Christianity and all this other stuff, and how you're just doing it to be more efficient. There's no sense. There's no logic.
And yeah, and just to bring like the food part, free and reduced lunch in Bracken County, 36.2% of the students are eligible for free or reduced lunch.
Right.
That's a third of the student population.
Right. And there will be kids included in that, the at the very extreme end of the spectrum, that on some days that meal might be the only one they get that day.
Mhm.
It's daunting to me. Daunting. Um I I mean, my God, Carter County, Carter County schools,
Over in Eastern Kentucky.
very rural. They were added into our congressional district in the last
Right.
redrawing of the
Over by
line.
Ashland.
Now listen to this. 20% of their funding, so 1% less than Bracken County. But the totality of what that means is dramatically different. So they would lose $3.1 million
Wow.
towards those school meals. They would lose another 3.6 million for Department of Education funding towards the district, and they would lose 35 educator jobs.
Wow.
I mean, I the impact is just insane.
And
So,
and to pull up the same statistic on the free or reduced meal plans, Carter County, 45.3% of the students qualify for free or reduced price meals.
right,
Almost half of the student population.
it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
So the real question is, where are our advocates in Congress that should be fighting for Kentucky?
And the problem is we don't have one. We don't
Well,
ha- I
well,
mean,
to be fair,
Morgan
now,
McGarvey. I mean,
yeah, Morgan McGarvey. And now that Mitch McConnell has nothing to risk, he's suddenly found a conscience. But no, we know it's all positioning so that people will listen to him when he says, "Here's who should replace me." But
right. But this is see, here's the thing when it comes to Thomas Massey, and I really, I gosh, if I could go up to every single person that lives in this district that was of voting age and just lay my hands on their shoulders and give them a little shake and say, "What the fuck?" It's
maybe a
like, don't,
big shake.
right? It's like, don't you understand? This man has done nothing, not one single positive thing for this congressional district in the entire time he has been in Congress. Not a dollar, not a project, nothing, nothing but stand on his ideology. There is a reason he was nicknamed Mr. No.
Yep.
Then he was nicknamed Mr. No Show. Now he's Mr. Standalone. Anybody else who had been in Congress for over a decade would have some clout by now. He has zero. He has
Mhm.
no friends in Congress. And there are those people out there who would say, well, that's okay. I don't care if my congressperson doesn't have this. You got to be able to build relationships with people. You've got to be able to negotiate and work with people so that you can get some of the things that you want or need. The
But
problem is that he goes up there with the position that he doesn't want or need anything. And since he doesn't, that can be interpreted as Congressional District 4 in Kentucky doesn't need anything.
mhm.
So we're all just supposed to sit here and swallow his bullcrap. And you add that to his love and hate relationship with Trump, you know, for and right now we have been in the hate column.
Right.
You know, he got smacked on the nose right after,
Yep.
you know, right before the inauguration, and then at the inauguration, because he was the sole vote from the Republican side against Mike Johnson becoming Speaker of the House again. So he got stripped of his committee, and let's not forget Trump mentioned him in his inaugural speech. So now, you know, he's leaping for joy in this orgasmic, you know, charismatic clash of love and hate because finally the bill that he has introduced every year is going to be taken seriously by the dude who sprinkles love and hate as if it's manna from heaven and people lap it up.
Yep. So you feel better now you got that off your
Yeah,
chest?
a little bit. I mean, I'm just like I'm so frustrated. You know, we do have in this district, and it should be said, Congressional District 4 in Kentucky has a large contingent of libertarians.
Yep, very large.
And if I'm not
Very good friend of mine's a libertarian.
well, and if I'm not mistaken, Kentucky District 4 has more libertarians than any other of the congressional districts. I could be wrong. I know that's what it was at one time.
Yeah,
It's not something a statistic that I've regularly checked back up
right.
on. And I'm, you know, I don't care. I don't care if you're a Democrat, a Republican, an independent, a libertarian, a green. I don't care if you worship the altar of Satan. There is common sense, right? There is good that can be done in the world. You know, if you are a person who always views government as bad, you know, what the hell are you doing there? Because you sure as shit aren't speaking for me.
Right.
Unfortunately, and I know I'm beating a dead horse, but as long as he puts an R after his name, you know,
Yep.
he gets the vote of people who will tell you to your face that they hate him. I mine I can't even I don't even know.
Yeah. Um, so since we don't have, since we don't have those folks, fighting for us, something that we fortunately had in the first in our first term in hell with the first Trump presidency, we had people inside government agencies that became something of a firewall against some of the damage. And I bring this up because, as everybody I'm sure is aware, the Elon's doggies are going through and getting IRS numbers and Social Security, and recently the director of Social Security resigned, and we are losing these people in the administration that have been there to help us.
I'm so torn on this because I can only imagine the emotional and psychological damage.
Hmm.
However, if I were one of those people, you would pry my cold, dead body from my desk and chair.
Right,
You know, we need a line of people protecting us and letting us know what's going on and doing
hmm,
everything in their power because they're in a position that they're the only in some cases they're the only one
yeah,
that to be protective of that data. So all of these, you know, leaders of these agencies dropping like flies is perhaps the scariest part of all
right,
because that leaves us very few avenues of lines of defense and people to rely on and call on. Um
And the other day I listened to an interview with somebody from the that was in one of those positions during the first administration, and they said one of the things that really helped them um, stay in the fight and keep fighting were the massive protests and the massive numbers of the people speaking up. That even when they were doing things that potentially jeopardized their job or they were afraid of, they were they were encouraged and supported by the number of just general people who were like, this is wrong. We shouldn't be doing this. This doesn't stand. So while, in some cases it may seem like, you're just shouting at the sky or something, in large numbers, it can make a difference to help those people who are in a position to actually be a firewall for us.
Right. And what surprises me is, with what you're saying is all of the major groups that you can think of, whether it be Indivisible, Move On, the Working Families Party, Planned Parenthood, on and on and on, up and running and organized much more quickly than the last time.
Hmm.
So we've seen many more protests, many more various activities
Hmm.
against what's happening than we did the first go around. I mean, when Trump was elected in 2016, our group, the Indivisible, under the original
Right.
heading, the Indivisible Northern Kentucky District 4 group didn't have its first meeting until February of 2017, which would be the equivalent of right now, February 2025. Well, we've already had, two meetings. We're getting ready to have our third. We've already had a protest. We've already had people calling. We've already had people on these massive webinars. I mean, everybody, down to the lowest levels, is up and running faster. And then you've got this new 50501 movement that's up and running.
Yep.
Heck, they've already had two protests just 12 days apart.
Yep.
And so I I don't know. However, I will say this. Mainstream media has been much less public leaning when
Hmm.
it comes to reporting these things.
Yep.
You don't see on your local news or on mainstream media the reporting from these events like you did the first time around,
Right.
and it kind of goes back to something that we've talked about before, where I think it was such a novelty to to the current
Right.
generations to have this kind of public political activity that was, very prevalent in the 60s and some into the 70s somewhat. And then it's like, it's like that people forgot that we had this power and that we could
Right.
do this. And so when he was elected the first time, it was like, wow, look
This
what
is what this is like.
right? Look what the people can do.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, and what's shocking is it's much more dangerous this time
Hmm.
around too. But it's almost like oh yeah, they've done that before,
But I
and
think
it's just
there's
like what?
But I think there's a more sinister piece here as well, because you have all the lawsuits that Trump brought against a number of media
Right,
companies and have
right.
settled. And I think it has really put a damper on the media's willingness to cover some of these stories the way they did the first time.
Yeah, but I'm sorry, I'm gonna call bullshit. That's the media's job.
I
Stand
know,
up to him. I mean, the fact that they've even given in and paid him his ransom
right,
is absolute. Nobody, no company. Back when this was happening in the 60s and 70s, there isn't a media outlet that was on the planet back then that would have given in to this shakedown. It's bullshit.
Well, I don't know about that. If you go back to the McCarthy era, um, you know, they um, what's his name? The broadcaster who did the stories about McCarthyism. He took a lot of heat from that and had why can't I think of his name? I'm drawing a blank. Super famous Edward R. Murrow.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
yeah, Edward R. Murrow. I mean, he had a hell of a time doing those, and him and his production crew took a lot of heat for doing that. And they lost a lot of sponsors, and he got a lot of pressure from higher up. Um, I think it was only his personal brand and his personal commitment that allowed that to go forward. And I think it's kind of a similar thing now. I mean,
But he never stopped.
right, he never stopped, but they tried to stop him. And
And
Trump
that's
has a long
okay.
Trump
I
has a
it's
long history of using lawsuits to quiet critics
Oh,
of his.
absolutely. But the thing is, we can't afford for them to kowtow to that. We can't
Right.
afford for them to give in. And you point out a great example. Where are these
Where are the Murrows?
bastions? Yeah, where are these bastions of the free press?
Hmm.
You know, they've got to be willing to stand up for this. They've got to be willing to take the heat.
Yeah.
I,
I mean,
I
you've got the Associated Press, which is doing a pretty good job, and they've been kicked out of the White House briefings for those, and NPR, which they're trying to eliminate since it's publicly funded.
right, Politico, they
Right.
got, and
Politico.
then you also have the journalists, the true journalists, in my opinion,
Hmm.
are the ones who are quitting the mass media organizations that they work for because they're not willing to sacrifice their journalistic integrity simply because the mass media that they work for is willing to do so. And kudos to all of them.
Yep.
All of them. I mean, Jim Acosta, he's taken off on Substack like nothing you've ever seen.
Yeah.
Um, Independent media, the Midas Touch,
Midas Touch is doing a lot.
a lot. And
Yeah.
Midas Touch has jumped above Joe Rogan's show, which of course is,
Which is amazing.
which is freaking the
I never thought anything would outpace Joe Rogan. He's just
well, at some point though, you've got to recognize a clown for a clown who's
true. True
willing to
that.
allow anybody on there to say anything they want at any time and not question the truth or the validity of what's being said. It's just an open platform for bullshit.
Yep.
It we could spend forever on that.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
One more thing that I think is really important,
Hmm.
super important that I want to touch on.
Okay.
Trump's social media post. And I quote, and this is all it said, and I quote, "He who saves his country does not violate any law." So basically the Mad King is declaring himself.
Yep.
And we all, as ridiculous as it seems, we all need to be cognizant of that. Because in my opinion, that raises the bar. It raises an alarm. If we were at a 1 or a 2 alarm fire, now we're up to a 3 alarm fire, right?
Right.
When he's declaring himself as above the law. And if you remember back the first time around when Robert Mueller was doing his investigation, right? One
Hmm.
of the big movements out of that time was the no one above the law protests and outrage that went on. And I will never forget this because it was one of the happiest, well, that's not happy is the wrong word, but it was one of the neatest things I ever personally experienced We had less than 48 hours notice that this protest was going to happen nationwide.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very hard under the best of circumstances to get enough people organized to do a protest that has significance. You know, more than 5, 10 people on a street corner. We had, I think it was at 48, or it might have been even just 24 hours. It was really like
It was a
between
short window.
24 and 36
Yeah.
hours. And part of that time frame was overnight because the word came out late in the day for everybody to get to their closest federal courthouse. And we were going to do this big no one is above the law protest.
Right.
And we did. We raced to the federal courthouse down in Covington,
Mm-hmm.
and we had somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 75 people show up, which on that short term of notice is amazing.
Oh yeah.
Um, because you're also limited in your reach in terms of getting to people, especially if one of the primary ways that you reach out and that people see your activities is via social media, because you never know when people are going to check in. I mean, people can go days without looking. But we had all these people down at the courthouse. We were, circling around the block and protesting, and then we all spread out on the sidewalk. The traffic was phenomenal, the
Mm-hmm.
visibility that we got. We had one car in particular, never forget this, who came by. They were honking and waving. They went around the block and down the street to Taco Bell, ordered like two ginormous sacks of food, and came back and handed it out the window to
Nice.
all the protesters who were standing out. And it was cold. It was like November. It was cold. It was during the evening rush hour. And so these people were like, here, have some food and warm up. I mean, it was,
Wait, did they bring food or Taco Bell?
well,
Just for clarity's sake.
it was, I'm not going down.
Clearly,
It,
we are sponsored by Taco Bell, as you can tell.
oh shoot. Anyway, so long story short, he sees himself as above the law. He's got his first case because of his push. Now he has asked for an emergency hearing
Mm-hmm.
with the Supreme Court. He is assuming that because he is responsible for putting three of these people on the Supreme Court with Amy Coney Barrett and Gorsuch and Kavanaugh.
Now, wait,
With
you
him,
distinctly said people. Is it these three or is it people that he put there?
stop it.
This is like the Taco Bell food thing.
Okay. Well, they are people. But anyway, so he's fully expecting that they are going to support him on this. And I think he's relying very heavily on their decision in criminal terms,
Yep.
where they said that as long as his activities fell under his job capacity as president, he could not be criminally
Right.
prosecuted. And this is where I think the big mistake is, and I'm hoping that I'm right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm no lawyer, I'm no legal scholar, but we aren't talking about criminality anymore.
Right.
We're talking about constitutionality,
Right.
two very different things.
Yep.
And I think he's going to lose.
I hope so.
I don't
Submit.
see John Roberts, Chief Justice John Roberts. I don't see him crossing that line.
Yeah.
Now, which means he has to pull one other person with him.
Mm-hmm.
And shockingly to a lot of people, anybody who's been paying attention to the SCOTUS, I think the one person, the most likely person to go that way with him is Amy Coney Barrett.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but all three, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh and Barrett, all three have crossed at different times on different things.
Yeah.
But constitutionality is a biggie.
Yeah.
It's the pinnacle. It's the apex. It's the number one thing.
Yeah.
They can let him get away with a lot of crap. But going against what is explicitly stated in the Constitution, I don't see it. Cross my fingers,
Yeah.
do your Wicca chants, make your voodoo dolls, whatever you got to do, say your prayers, everything, whatever it is you do to get help from the higher power that you believe in, do it now more than ever. Do it.
So a little interesting background on that post that he did. The quote: "He who saves his country does not violate any law." Um, Traditionally, it's been attributed to Napoleon Bonaparte, but there's no actual documentation of that. Um, it it's often used to justify erosion of legal norms while pursuing nationalist goals. Notably, it was used by a Norwegian terrorist and convicted mass murderer, Anders Behring Breivik,
What?
who identifies as a Nazi, imagine that, and used it as justification for the 2011 Norway attack. It also is said to be aligned with Vladimir Putin's governance style.
Imagine that.
Yeah. Also employed by some people you may not have heard of, Mussolini in Italy and Hitler in Germany.
Oh,
They're not very well
surprise,
known
surprise,
people.
surprise.
Yeah. So so yeah, definitely the kind of people I would fully suspect Trump to be quoting.
It's We are living in dangerous and unprecedented times.
Hmm.
I mean, he may have pushed the button the first time around. This time around, he's freaking sitting on the damn thing. And there's people who are sitting in his lap, helping him stay there. And then you've got, our doggy head, Elon Musk, who's standing behind the chair, pushing his hands down on Trump's shoulders, holding him in place because he's actually the one running the show and pulling the strings.
Yep,
It,
absolutely.
so,
Yeah. Every time I see that, the DOGE, right, Department of whatever, whatever, and I know it's to align with Elon's cryptocurrency, right, to try to line his pockets.
oh,
Um,
you mean the one that they use to rip off their own supporters and
yeah,
enrich themselves? Yeah,
yeah, that
okay.
one.
Okay.
It just every time I look at it, it doesn't look like Doge. It looks like doggy to me. So that's why I'm like, I'm just gonna call it his doggy posse, his doggy clan, if you
I
will.
can I can dig
Let's
it.
call it his doggy clan. That
See,
seems appropriate.
I want to put another D in there and call it Dodge.
Dodge.
Lots I could do with that. But your doggy works too. I can get a
Yep. Oh, so well, excellent. So we covered a lot of ground this week.
Yes, we did. And
Wonder if
it's
anything will happen next week.
yeah.
Probably not. It'll
Be
probably be
looking
quiet.
for us on all social media platforms. Send us an email at info@indivisible.nky.com if you want to be included on any email blasts that we do, because we will be having some significant activities coming up, and probably more in the near future than you think.
Yep.
So make sure you're following us on your favorite platform.
Absolutely. And we might have some surprises for you with who we'll be talking with at different times. So you definitely want
Yes,
to stay tuned for that.
yes.
As always, if there's anything you'd like to hear on our show, or suggestions for our show, or tell us exactly what you think of us, please reach out. We'd love to hear your
Well, let's
feedback.
not go too far.
Well, the other day, I was walking down the street and somebody saw me and said, "Hey, you're number one." So I was like, "Great." I mean, they were using the wrong finger. They were
Oh.
using their middle finger saying number one, but I was just assuming their other finger was sore. So hey, I'm number one. I'm number one.
Yeah, we bring out the goodness in everyone.
Yeah. All right. Well, until next week, everyone, stay safe. Call your representatives in Kentucky. Call your representatives in Kentucky.
And if you happen to hear this today or any day, make sure you're also calling your senators in D.C. about the confirmation hearings that are ongoing. It looks like today's going to be the vote on Kash Patel. So,
Hey, what could possibly go wrong? We're going to be dead after RFK gets done with us anyway.
oh God.
All righty. Everyone have a good one. We'll talk to you next week. Until then, this is Roberto Henriquez.
And Dickerson, take care, all.